Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us at this webinar co-organized by Open Compute Project Foundation and TUSRSI. The large part of this very first webinar will be about the retail experience in design of open hardware solutions. My name is Lesia Dimit and I'm a strategic innovation engineer at TUSRSI, a French manufacturer of IT solutions. Also, I'm a project lead at the OCP community in the European level. There is also the area where we discuss about OCP technology and projects across this region. The OCP regional community is launching a series of webinars. The large topic of these webinars will be about design of data center of the future within the OCP philosophy. Each online meetup will be dedicated to a specific topic, as for example, this one, which is about retail experience. The duration of our webinar is 1 hour. We will have up to 15% minute of presentation that will then follow up with a discussion. You can type your questions in the chat section at any time. We will select several of them and then discuss with our guests. In this very first meetup, you will hear about the Open Compute Project Foundation and its philosophy, and also about the vision and latest experience from TUSRSI and retail, and how do we engage in OCP. Open Compute Project Foundation is a rapidly growing open innovation community that aims to redesign hardware technology and deliver the most efficient and scalable computing solutions. TUSRSI is a server manufacturer that provides IT solutions for data centers. Our solutions combine high-performance systems and energy efficiency. TUSRSI is a platinum member of OCP. Rittal, our third guest for today, is an international IT provider of standardized and modular scalable solutions for turnkey-ready edge data centers. Rittal is a gold member of OCP. Among our guests today, we have Steve Helvey. Steve Helvey is the Vice President, Channel Development at the Open Compute Project Foundation. We also have Russell Antilikili, who is a Product Manager for Global IT Accounts at Rittal Germany. He works closely with clients and advises them on hardware scale, high-performance computing, cooling, and edge solutions. Caleb Lusk is an engineer, system consultant at Rittal USA. He works across with projects and project teams across global engineers and projects involved in design of racks, liquid cooling solutions. He is also a project lead at the Open Rack and Power project group. Unfortunately, because of the unforeseen circumstances, Caleb was not able to join us for this webinar today, but we will be inviting him for another one webinar where you will be able to ask him all questions. The idea to organize this meetup was born during the OCP Global Summit that was held this March in San Jose, California. My guest and I had a conversation and we decided to launch this webinar within the mission to improve the involvement of the members of this community and also increase the visibility of the Open Compute project in Europe. Now I would like to invite Steve, VP of Channel Development from OCP, to tell us more about OCP Foundation, about the role and main principles. Steve, can you tell us more?
Thank you, Lesia. It's good to be here, and I want to thank as well as Rittal for allowing me to share a few things with the audience. The Open Compute project started back around 2010, 2011, when Facebook announced that they were going to build their own data centers. And at that particular time, they started to outpace some of the traditional hardware models. And when they started to look at building a brand new data center, they asked basic questions around, well, what can we get rid of? What can we eliminate? Can we raise the operating temperatures? Can we increase the relative humidity? And do we need such things as centralized power supplies? So they were able to start really from scratch in the beginning and redesign their entire infrastructure. From that, their designs, they decided to take it a step further, open source those designs and develop an entire community around that. So with the help of a few other board members around Microsoft, Intel, Rackspace, and Goldman Sachs, the OCP Foundation was born. It's now close to 200 members contributing a variety of designs, specs, products across multiple projects. And there's really 4 things that embody the OCP Foundation and everything that comes into the projects. And that is, one is it efficient? Does it scale? What kind of impact does it have? And we want to make sure that it remains open. So those are really the 4 key tenets of open compute. At the heart of OCP are the projects. So we currently have 10 working projects as well as a few sub-projects, and you can see them listed here across networking, server storage, rack and power. We'll be spending quite a bit of time on the rack and power group today here since 2CRSI and Rittal are very, very active in these particular projects. But what's important to note is there's over 6,000 engineers working on common problems across these projects. So it's really, it's an empowering community to go solve pretty interesting big problems within infrastructure. And I think that what's notable about 2CRSI and Rittal is that when they joined as members, it's not just selling a particular product or listening in on the calls. These are 2 companies that are actually leading this particular effort. Rittal specifically are actual project leads within rack and power, and 2CRSI making a recent contribution. And a contribution could be a specification, a written specification. It could be an actual product that they're manufacturing around a specific specification, reference architectures, case studies, white papers, everything to drive the industry forward. And these 2 companies have done a pretty impressive job over the last year in each of those categories. Lacey, I'll turn it back over to you.
Now, I would like to tell you a few words about 2CRSI and also about our engagement in the OCP community. The company has been an OCP Platinum member since September 2018. As you may see, we're quite new in this community, but we already see the first results of being a member of it. So we work in projects and we get involved in the different types of projects. We work, for example, with advanced cooling solutions. We engage with a small group of experts on the development of specification for immersion cooling modules and for immersion cooling IT. We also started to work with the HPC team. Our another part of project is involvement in the activity of the regional project community. And this specific webinar is a part of this activity. We work extensively with the Rack and Power project group. For this group, we already did a couple of contributions and applied for several for product recognition program. And I would like to give you some examples of it. Our first approved contribution is a 2CRSI connector that you will be able to see. This connector has a compact design that connects the server to the 12-volt bus bar while reducing the required wiring within the OCP racks. The model makes the server assembly easy and secure. In addition to simplify the installation of servers into the racks, it significantly decreases the maintenance time. This product is already recognized as an OCP accepted. OCP accepted products mean that they comply 100% with specification, and the design files are open sourced and available. They also meet 3 or more of the OCP tenets and can only be sold with a warranty and support. Our second contribution, which is currently in progress, is a smart PDU, a power distribution and monitoring unit. This compared to the original design, the size of our PDU was reduced by 80% and contains a monitoring solution, which is embedded already into this PDU. We also seek to get the OCP accepted recognition for our PDU. Both products, connector and the smart PDU, are compatible with OpenRack standard specification version 1.2. Now I would like to invite Rittal and tell us more about Rittal. Rittal, could you please tell us more about your role at the OCP and how Rittal is engaged?
Yeah. My name is Rittal Smart. I am the product manager for IT key accounts, and my role in the OCP group is that I'm leading all the OCP community activities inside of Rittal. And my colleague, Caleb Lusk, he's also working for Rittal, who is also the chairman of the Rack and Power group. First of all, I would like to talk about Rittal's experience about the Open Compute project and what we did and what we're doing inside of the working groups. So I would like to talk a little bit at first about Rittal, some facts about the company, about how we are structured, and then we can go further to OCP relevant topics. Rittal is a German company. We are able to provide whole solutions for the IT infrastructure to the customer. So that means we are able to provide a whole solution bundle from rack, cooling, power, containerized solution, up to X as a service, what is coming from our subsidiary company, InnovoCloud or German Edge Cloud. Rittal was founded in 1961 in Germany, as I mentioned. We have 10,000 employees all over the world. They are located in our 58 international subsidiaries or in the 13 production sites on the world. On the map, you can see the worldwide production sites from Rittal. From the supply chain point of view, we are covering every part from EMEA, Asia, Europe, and America. So just for your reference, but we are producing 15,000 enclosures each day, and we are able to produce 200,000 cooling units a year. We are the second top consumer of sheet metal after the automobile industry in Europe. So just a number for you guys. After the introduction from Rittal, I would like to give the ball over to Steve Helwigan from the OCP community, and he will explain about why open hardware.
There are a few things that we're seeing in the markets that's causing people to look at a different. Of course, with the data volumes increasing, there's a need to handle that data slightly differently. Specifically around the software, cloud-enabled apps are developed these days. You're running more into containerized applications such as Hadoop or Kubernetes, and a lot of companies are looking for different new types of hardware to run these new cloud-enabled applications. And what we're finding is more and more people move toward open source software. It's inevitable that some of the disaggregation that takes place at the hardware layer follows suit. So we're seeing a trend of the more open source minded a company is on the software side. We're seeing that translate into people wanting to look at more open source and open designs at the hardware layer. The business reasons outside of the software piece, so that's on the technology side. On the business reason side, we're seeing efficiency being one of the reasons. Redesigns, which Rasul will get into a little bit later, at the rack level and at the compute layer, run a great deal more efficiently. There are some of the companies out there that are seeing anywhere between, say, a 10 to 15, all the way up to 50% more efficient running particular OCP servers. And I think that some of this is being driven at the company layer, and then there's some of this is being actually driven by regional public sector as more efficiency standards are introduced at the data in 2020 around the data center server efficiency at idle. It's a big thing that's starting to drive OCP is around power efficiency in servers. The second key thing that we're seeing is around OpEx. The way that OCP is designed, it has this edict around being simple. Everything we do has to be open, efficient, scalable, extremely simple to use. One of our customers that's using Open Compute, Yahoo, has actually timed and did an audit on how fast it is to service an OCP server and rack, and they've come up with the that they can change almost every part in their infrastructure within 180 seconds on the OCP. Really, designs allow for some pretty interesting OpEx savings. So efficient reasons, and then of course we see a big side that's driving some of the technology changes. Rittal?
All right. So thanks, Steve. I would like to go forward how Rittal is engaged into the Open Compute project. Yeah, Rittal were involved since 2012, and we are a gold member since 2016. To be a part of the OCP enables an actively to participate on events, and the most important thing is to develop product and, let's say, to setting trends for future OCP roadmaps. Through the membership, we are contributing specification into the Racking Power Working Group. We are participating, as I mentioned before, actively in OCP summits in US and also in Europe, and also leading workshops and presentations. As mentioned, Rittal is involved in the Racking Power Group and also in the subgroup Advanced Cooling Solution, where we are actively deploying products and writing specifications. So, as I mentioned, we are on every OCP summit leading presentations. Last time in March, where the summit was in San Jose, we had 3 presentations in regards of rack, in regards of power, and also cooling. And I would like to give some overview about customer feedback. Steve, could you go ahead, please?
So similar to what I mentioned earlier, there are some things that we're noticing when people start to look at open compute around this efficiency angle and some of certainly the high temperatures. We've noticed that being deployed, and as that continues to increase in certain geographies, it's a big win for OCP. As I'd mentioned on the simplified maintenance and manual work through examples such as Yahoo, then also the way OpenRack is designed, you have a single AC to DC conversion in the PowerShell, so you really you avoid some of that loss that you get in the 2-step process, and the power going directly, you get DC right into the bus bar. So Rittal and the team at Rittal have done a pretty good job of capitalizing and taking the OCP spec that was created and really driving that message throughout the enterprise and the tier 2 cloud service providers. It does take some education as to what makes the Open Rack difference, where the efficiencies are gained. But I think between Rittal's efforts on the manufacturing side, and then you have a partner like and then build a solution around it, because at the end of the day, the rack and the power shelf is a component, but it takes a company like 2CRSI to bundle that solution into either an HPC-oriented solution or perhaps an enterprise workload. Efficiencies come into play, is having partners like this to be able to deliver those all-up solutions. So this is a pretty good team together when you have 2CRSI working with Rittal to deliver these enterprise.
Right. Thanks for the kind words, Steve. And I would like to show you where Rittal came from and what we did in the OCP project, or let's say the Open Compute project in the past. So on the timeline, you can see that we are involved near to the beginning of the Open Compute project. Rittal joined the community in 2012 and completed the Open Rack spec v1.0 in the Racking Power Group 1 year later in 2013. In 2014, we were the lead developer of the v1.2 Open Rack and shipped already 3,000 racks to the OCP user based on v1. And till 2017, we shipped over 15,000 OCP racks based on the v1.2 specification to OCP and end users. So there we can see there's a much demand, a huge demand, and the trend is going on. Now we are going to provide a whole solution to the customer. That is our goal. Rittal, since 2018, Rittal is able to sell power components to the customer. Rittal is also working on OCP cooling development, what will be hopefully finalized end of this year. And we also started the development in the Racking Power Group of the specification v3.0 rack. The key success is the efficient work, as Steve mentioned before, in the efficient working stream within the OCP project group, and also the demand from the market. Now I would like to give an overview about Rittal's OCP product in regards to rack power, cooling, and solution. As you saw before, we are heavily involved in the rack development. And our main runner regards the rack is the OCP rack with the 12-volt DC busbar on the back. The rack itself is a solid part based on the specification, but the other components are slightly modular. The 12-volt busbar, DC busbar, allows you to use it in two separate power zones, one in the top and one in the bottom. That means that you can use the OCP rack in a power range from 6.6 kW up to 40 kW based on the busbar differentiation, the configuration, of course. And also we developed the 48-volt DC busbar with 15 and 36 kW per rack. The rack itself, as I mentioned before, is the same. The busbar is, they have some slightly changes or differences. We also set up accessories for the OCP rack that allows you, from the optical point of view, a homogeneous view in your data center. That the customer can use side panels or perforated doors for security aspects also. One interesting accessory are the 19-inch adapter strip that allows the customer to use also 19-inch IT equipment. Most of the OCP users are thinking about, OCP is just, let's say, 21-inch. No, OCP can be also 19-inch. As I mentioned previously, we are not a rack supplier. We are well known as a rack supplier, but we are going to be, or we are a solution provider. As I mentioned previously, we are able to provide power components like power supply unit, battery backup unit, PDUs, etc. What is getting installed inside of the rack. Those components are available since 2018. Coming to cooling, really important fact, duty fact that servers are getting more power hungry. And also now and also in the future, the OCP team set up the Advanced Cooling Solutions subgroup in 2018, sorry. And Rittal is working on the door heat exchanger subgroup to develop a rear door for the OCP rack, what is based on V.0. The door heat exchanger is perfect for use with free indirect cooling and has a cooling capacity from 10 to 20 kW. The official announcement was during the OCP Summit in 2019 in March, and hopefully our goal is to have a prototype in Amsterdam in September in 2019. I would like to show the combinations about Rittal Smart solutions and the combinations with the OCP solutions. We as Rittal modified the OCP rack a little bit. Definitely it is inside of the spec, there is no question. But the customer can easily install Rittal standard components like our liquid cooling, package cooling, or the CMC for monitoring. And it is completely scalable from one rack to a fully integrated containerized solution. The OCP rack is also usable for the co-location business. It is possible to separate, as you can see in the picture down, to separate it physically into two zones. That means we have divided doors and divided busbar. This development is getting done with a telco customer in Europe, and we are looking forward to get more and more customers who are adopting OCP technology. As I mentioned before, from one rack to a containerized solution, edge is the keyword, and that is possible with 14 OCP racks inside of the standard container. With power and cooling, the customer can get a containerized solution for edge application. And as you know, the busbar edge is going to be more and more popular in the IT world. And I would like to heavily invite you to our 2 OCP Experience Center, what is located in Amsterdam for the European market and what is located in Santa Clara in the Bay Area in the US. There you can get in touch, see how the OCP products are operating in a hotel or co-rail solution. And would like to invite you there. You can contact me every time when you want a free tour or let's say a seminar on that location. I would like to thank you again. Thanks for listening and joining the first OCP webinar with CSR2 and Rittal. Thank you.
Thank you, Rittal. Now I think we are ready to move to our Q&A, and we will take some questions. Before we go into the question, please, I would like to remind you that you can ask your questions in the question part of this webinar. Please write them down, and we will take some of them to discuss during the Q&A session. So I have a few questions to Rittal. Can you please tell us how does open compute or open collaboration is perceived by Rittal?
Yes.
In fact, what does people at Rittal think about OCP and involvement in the OCP?
So we as Rittal looking really forward to work inside of the communities, because the goal is, as we mentioned in this webinar, the goal is standardization, cost efficiency, and this is what the customer is looking for. When the customer is happy, we are happy anyway. So from Rittal perspective, from R&D to sales, we are, let's say, looking really forward to every contribution to work in every OCP working group, and that makes really fun to work, and we are really motivated to be inside of the community. And the best thing is when you're getting really qualitative and good feedback from the customer regarding that the technology is really good, and that's the goal of OCP and also Rittal.
Okay, thank you. Now I have a question both for you and Steve. When you work in OCP, when you engage with the people in the community, what kind of accelerators have you able to identify? What help you to advance in your work?
Yeah, go ahead, Rittal.
I like to work in the working groups. I like to work in the working groups together. You're sitting in the working group on the call or on the table with your customer, with your competitor and partner, and discussing about new future technologies. And this is what makes sense. This is the way innovation are getting developed. And this is for me the most important part.
And to just add to that, a couple of the, as Rittal mentioned, one of the biggest advantages is sitting next to people that are working on a common problem. Just a recent specification that came through on a new network interface card, the MES card, that specification had over 10 companies, both competitors and end users, all working on that particular specification. So when you see that type of thing come through the foundation, you can really start to leverage your engineering horsepower within each one of your companies and reduce your time to market. A couple of the barriers that I have seen in some of these groups is just the fear of that you're giving away the IP, or your concern about sharing too much. And what we've found is that those companies, once they get through that first contribution process and they realize that they're not giving up IP, but they're sharing a specification that allows people to innovate on top of it. And then as an end customer, you actually have that one specification, and then you can go have multiple suppliers, and the vendors themselves and the suppliers can take the time to really focus on the value add on their product around the software and the services from a business standpoint, a higher value to the vendors and to the customers. So it's the biggest barrier I see is the willingness and the openness to get started. But once they do, we've seen these companies that have started to share really accelerate their time to market in certain areas.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rittal. It's a very inspiring discussion. And I would like also to add a few words from the 2Series side. As I said, we are quite new in this open compute community. It has been just a year that we are a member of that. But we already seen some results. We do like to share and collaborate with people from different projects to share our know-how. I agree with Steve that we had this kind of a fear to sharing our specification specifically on the connector, but we realized that there are so many benefits of sharing and contributing to the community. And another thing is that we had a lot of visibility thanks to sharing with the groups and sharing with our potential clients. Now, Steve, I'll have another question. It's about, I know that you travel a lot. You cover not only Europe, but also you work with the OCP in US and Asia. So could you please tell us what's the difference between OCP community in the US, in Europe, and in Asia?
Sure, I'll cover this in a couple areas. One is the community itself. It is a US-based organization, but I always reference this data point that 3 years ago, when I first started with Open Compute, there were 2 companies that were headquartered within Europe that were members of OCP. Now, 3 years later, there are over 40 companies in the foundation that are headquartered in Europe. So this is a really impressive momentum that we're seeing from Europe. There are, what we're also seeing is smaller, faster adoptions within Europe. So people are actually taking POCs to market in their environment in smaller quantities faster in Europe. In America, it's traditionally been focused on, say, web scale companies, tier 2 companies, and primarily tech-based companies is where we've seen the most momentum. But in Europe, we've seen a wide variety of industries. We've seen everybody from public sector to financial services, to hosting companies, and in different sizes, small startups to very large government organizations, starting to look at Open Compute. And they may just be testing one rack, they may just be looking at open networking, but we're seeing a wide variety of industries and technology adoptions in Europe. Relative to Asia, the primary area has been North Asia. So we've seen good traction in Japan, primarily been driven by a very strong service provider that we have there. So a strong partner usually leads to strong adoption. And in China, we're just getting started. So I would say within the last year, we've seen a lot of the large hyperscale companies join, Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent, as well as the vendors from North Asia have joined as well. So we're early days in China, so we'll see how that market plays out. But overall, I would say the best example of how OCP can be adopted at the enterprise level and still get the benefits out of smaller deployments, scaling all the way up to relatively large deployments, is in Europe. And lastly, the public sector is really driving a lot of interesting things on the facilities angle. So the majority of the facilities discussions around, Rasul had mentioned modular data center, that's being driven heavily out of Europe. Heat reuse and the ability to reuse the heat and plug it into district heating systems. All of that being driven, the Colo Ready program, having colos ready to adopt the open rack, that's all been driven primarily out of Europe. So real good cross-section, not only at the project contribution side, but on the adoption side.
Thank you, Steve. Russell, do you have something to add from the standpoint of Rittal about difference in US and Europe? Do you see any differences?
So the difference, what I see from when I compare Europe and the US is from Rittal's perspective more hyperscale driven, and the Europe is more, let's say, enterprise, telco, financial service, as Steve mentioned before, or telcos are going to adapt it more and more. So that's the main difference from US and Europe. In Europe, we have a larger market, let's say. We have the telcos, we have financial services, they are really interested on that. So that's currently the main change, main difference what I see.
Thank you. And my last question will be about the design of future. As we announced that the topic of this series of webinars that will be, we'll have some webinars later on, and the idea is to work on the topic of designing the data center of the future. So I would like to know, how does OCP communities helping you, also Steve and Rittal, to work towards the design of data center of the future? Probably Steve, maybe you can take it on a high level answer, and Rittal, you can address specifically for Rittal. Please, Steve.
Yeah, I'll go back to a couple of the public sector examples. As I'd mentioned, the EU regulation around server efficiency, but there are also other projects that are happening in Europe. In Copenhagen recently, the UN hosted an event focused on data center efficiency and the ability to reuse the heat. So over scalers and other data centers have done a great job at focusing on renewable energy and driving low PUEs. The next big challenge is how to reuse that heat back into the district heating system. So the other big piece is around liquid cooling, as tool mentioned, as more dense and as compute needs get higher and higher, the heat is going to be something that an air-cooled data center may or may not be able to handle. So we're seeing a lot of momentum on advanced cooling techniques, and I know that 2CRSI is working a lot on that area as well. So those are the two areas that I see around reusing, and then specifically around how data centers change, both at the edge as well as for advanced cooling.
Rittal, would you like to complete the reply of Steve and add some examples how OCP is helping you to build the data center of the future, from the technical point of view, from business, and probably from the cultural point of view?
Sure, of course. So when I remember last year, there was the announcement of the subgroup advanced cooling solution, and the OCP engineer was sitting by us in headquarters, and he said, "Hey, look, guys, the power consumption of servers are getting more and more, and the demand of cooling will be much higher than today. So we decided to create the subgroup cooling." 2 months later, I've been at another show in London, and there you can saw a lot of suppliers were showing their cooling solution, immersion cooling, direct to cooling, liquid cooling, etc. And on the OCP Summit this year, we could saw also a lot of suppliers who were showing their cooling solutions. So that means from the technology point of view, the OCP community are setting trends, and these are getting followed. And these are definitely good trends. What would the reality of the data center would be in the future? And also you can see on the in the rack and power group where we are designing the V3 rack. On the V2 rack, the cooling system was not considered, but on the V3 rack, the cooling is considered. Let's say manifolds on the back for cooling, for liquid cooling, also let's say some points for the door heat exchanger. So that means from the technical point of view, or let's say from the strategic point of view, the trend is getting set by the OCP community, and luckily most of them are following it.
Thank you so much for these questions and for your replies. It was a very interesting discussion, and before we wrap up, I would like to say that there is an OCP event that will be held in Amsterdam in September 26 and 27, and it is OCP Regional Summit. Last year, we had 60% of people attending from Europe. We had 316 attendees, and there was 33 sponsors, and we had around 60 working sessions in total from different groups, from different keynotes. And I really hope that we'll be able to rock these numbers this year. We'll be organizing some formal and informal events at the OCP Regional Summit. Please join us. Feel free to reach myself, Steve, Caleb, and Rittal. We'll be happy to give you more information about the European community, and we are looking forward to meeting you in Amsterdam. With this, I would like to thank you for your participation and thank you for joining this webinar. We'll be following up to send you further information, inform you about other future meetups and webinars, and we'll hope to stay and keep in touch with you. Thank you so much.